Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they've made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Today is an exciting guest. She is someone you're just going to learn so much from. She's an entrepreneur. She's got a sales and marketing background. She's a seasoned consultant and helps entrepreneurs write, publish, and most importantly, sell their books and connect. She's also the author of 4 books, which covers different topics from book publishing, marketing, sales, and real estate. Please welcome to the show, President of Book Launchers, Julie Broad. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Let's start with the main question. The entrepreneur gene, does it exist and what does it mean to you?
I think ultimately what creates most entrepreneurs is a problem that they wish somebody else would solve, but nobody has solved it. So they go and solve it themselves. So in that view, I guess I would say it's not a gene, it's just somebody in the right spot. But I also think there is an element of that entrepreneurial gene. I do think there's maybe more of a personality type that is drawn towards being that person that will solve that problem because, just recently, Sarah Blakely has come out with high heels that are sneakers mixed with high heels. I kind of wish she made nicer looking heels personally. But I mean, she took the problem of wishing there was a comfortable high heel and she turned sneakers into high heels. And I think, all of us who have worn high heels, I should say not all of us, but all of us who have worn high heels have wished there was a more comfortable high heel, but we didn't necessarily go out and solve the problem. And I think that's that personality type that I mean when I say there's not necessarily a gene, but a personality type that comes up against a problem and goes, well, nobody else is solving this. I better go do it.
There's an element of risk-taking, creativity, and a just go figure it outness. Is that a word? Go figure it outness. Do you think that about yourself?
Yeah, I also have this thing when somebody says, "Oh no, like that doesn't sound like a good idea," and I go, "Oh, no, I think it is a good idea. I better go find out." So yeah, I definitely have that element of yeah, I'll go figure it out. I'll go find an answer.
Any entrepreneurs in the family?
My parents, they never would have called themselves entrepreneurs, but business owners. So they built and ran a 20-room motel. And, it was a 24/7 job. Really, when I think of entrepreneurship, they solved a problem, I guess. People needed a place to stay on the side of the highway. But yeah, I really think it was more of a job that they created for themselves. And same with they ran a Airbnb, or not an Airbnb, sorry, a bed and breakfast afterwards. And same thing, it was a 24/7, even more work actually than the motel because they had to make breakfast for people. But yeah, they were business owners, and my grandfather before them owned a motel too.
That is so interesting. I feel like we've just opened up the world of debate. Are these terms mutually exclusive? I think coming into this conversation, I would have said no. But as you've described it, I can understand your point of view, right? Where the entrepreneur is trying to see a problem in the world and go solve it. Your parents wanted to make a good income and living for their family, and they constructed a job, to use your words. And many people do that, right? They have a job that's like a lifestyle job. They enjoy it, and it's whether it's your, hey, I don't want to call a doctor a lifestyle job, but it's something that you do for a very long period of time. And you're never intending to sell your skills as being a doctor, right? Or having a practice. Some of them just kind of close and retire. And that's okay, right? Your parents decided maybe to close the motel, close the Airbnb, or are they still running the Airbnb?
No, I mean, they sold it, but they didn't sell it as a bed and breakfast. They sold it as a house. Like it was just a very, very, very large house.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And so do you think any of those take risk kind of traits passed on to you then?
Oh, absolutely. I think the big thing for me was that I saw them, controlling their day. So as much as it was a 24/7 job, And it was hard. Like my dad would get the doorbell would ring at 2 in the morning. So he was in the middle of sleep and he would put on his house coat and go down the stairs and rent a room. Because if he wasn't full, he would rather get the money for that room than not. And so, so that was a hard living. But at the same time, they were there for me, right? They had control over, oh, Julie needs to be picked up from school or she has a volleyball game. Like they were always there for me. Sometimes frustratingly so, they were always there. As a teenager. But so I think there was that element that appealed to me more so. I never really saw what they did as risk taking. It certainly was. I mean, they took a piece of dirt in the middle of Alberta, Canada, and built a motel on the side of a highway. So they definitely were risk takers. But it never, as a child, I never saw it that way. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, now you have the appreciation of what they did do. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We all face challenges in our lives, our businesses. You were just commenting on one of them, of having more freedom and being able to choose how we spend our time. For you as an entrepreneur, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing right now? Time, money, people, any one of those?
I only get to choose one.
No, you can pick as many as you want.
Yeah, I mean, so there's so many opportunities right now. And with AI coming on so strongly, so many opportunities to capitalize on it, to leverage it. And then, for me, I've seen a lot of opportunity to expand the business in a couple of different directions. And, so then it depends which opportunity I'm thinking about in this moment, because when I think about certain opportunities, capital becomes the challenge. When I think about other opportunities, people become the challenge. And time is in many ways a challenge, but I feel like capital and people help solve the time problem. So they all go hand in hand. That's why I really can't pick one particular challenge. I think for me, it's really just getting clarity of the next thing I want to do, because there are a handful of very important and exciting things I want to tackle in the next couple of years. And so the challenge is always, okay, which one is the most important to tackle next?
How do you think about that? How do you think about it, and what piece of advice can you offer to other entrepreneurs who are probably wrestling with that same challenge of what to tackle next?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a perfect formula for what I'm going to do. I always run things by my team and see what is going to get everybody excited is part of it. So I kind of vet the ideas. I talk to different people, in the space, not in the space, and I see what people are really interested in or the comments that they make. And after I've done some research and kind of vetted it a bit, I bring it to my team and I see which one they think is the most exciting. But ultimately, I look at the big picture. Where do I want to be? I never go 5 years because I'm never where I want to be at 5 years. I'm usually somewhere totally different. But I kind of go bigger picture. Where are we heading, and which one is going to move us closer to that? And have the team be really excited to work towards that thing. And that's kind of my unscientific way of moving forward.
As we look ahead to the future, you mentioned technology. Artificial intelligence is absolutely out there. Every company is going to have some way of leveraging it, hopefully for the good. How do you think about that in your industry, those tools in your industry? And is that exciting to you, or do you have reservations?
I've gone like full force towards AI in a lot of ways. And I'll give you an example. We found a tool that helps somebody on my team who oversees all the Amazon ads for our clients, and he's basically a digital marketing strategist. And with one AI tool, we were able to free up an entire day of VA work that was being done. And so now the VA can do other things to help him. And so it's basically I guess some people say it's taking jobs, but for us, it's really created the opportunity for him to work on more strategic things. And now we're developing our own software. And so he was able to kind of go, okay, now I've got capacity so we can take on some strategic initiatives and do a little bit more, with the time that we have. So we're doing that with every job. We're kind of looking at every position in the company and we're going, is there a way to do this more efficiently and effectively so that we can now leverage, and move forward in a more strategic and exciting way? Because a lot of us have stuff in our jobs that we do every day that we're like, God, I wish a robot could do this. Well, now there are robots that can do it.
Yes. Yes, there are. And I think you're not fearing the technology, you're leaning in on it. thinking about how it can provide extra value. I think a lot of people worry that, oh, it's going to take away these jobs. I think it's more about an enhancement. You just gave a great example of that. So thank you. Um, we learned a lot from you. We've talked a lot about a number of things here, being an entrepreneur, technology. Now, in this next part, I want to learn more about you. So, Julie, take us way back here. What's the origin story for little Julie?
Well, besides the fact that I grew up in a motel on the side of a highway.
Yes, besides that.
No, I mean, I always thought I would be a writer as a little girl, but people told me writers didn't make money and I had some bad grades in English class. So I decided to go to business school. And through kind of business school, I got interested in real estate. And actually, it was a coworker of one of my first jobs. I was working for Kimberly Clark Canada, and she said, "Read Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's gonna really just blow your mind." So I read it, and she was right. I was like, "Oh, geez, I'm working really hard for my money. I need to get my money working hard for me." And I started investing. I took money that I was gonna go put towards MBA, and I started investing in real estate and little bit by that was 2001. And so by 2008, which never asked me for timing advice, I was like, I'm going to go full time at this thing. So I went full time as a real estate investor, launched a training and education company. And it was through that I got back to being a writer, which is always funny. People are like, real estate writing? But I started writing a newsletter because everybody wanted to hear my real estate stories. And I started writing this newsletter, and little bit by bit, I ended up building a platform, newsletters, a YouTube channel. I started speaking, and I got the opportunity to potentially publish a book. But the publisher that approached me didn't like my idea. They said no, too general, and then they said, here, do a book proposal on this idea. And then they said, oh no, we don't think you can sell enough books. So
Ouch.
yeah. So first they didn't like my idea, then they didn't like me, but they were the ones that approached me. So
Wait a minute. That doesn't sound right. They learned more about you than they turned you down.
exactly. It wasn't very nice. But it helped me because I went, you know what, forget you. I'm going to do this better. And I took my first book, the idea they said wasn't any good. And I decided to self-publish it so I could write the exact book that I wanted to write. And I just wrote it to help. I just thought, you know what, maybe nobody buys it, but if I can help one person, I've done my job. And I ended up taking it to #1 in Amazon and print books, ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones. It sold, I don't even know how many thousands of copies. And still to this day, that was 2013. So, 11 years later, that book still sells really well. And it's because it solved a problem and it helped people. And it just opened my eyes to the power of self-publishing. And that was way more fun than tenants. And I eventually started Book Launchers, which is a full service self-publishing company helping people write, publish, and like you said, most importantly, sell that book.
That is so cool. I didn't know all of that. I had met you twice. I think once in, gosh, where were we? We were in Arizona maybe, and the other
Yeah.
time in Ohio, and had the opportunity to hear you speak. And I don't think I knew that story. So that's really, really cool. I love that you kind of went through this yourself and realized the problem and the opportunity, and seeing that opportunity as an entrepreneur, which you are, jumping in with both feet. So that's super, super cool. If you could go back in time and give yourself some entrepreneurial advice, what would it be?
Besides buying Bitcoin when it first came out. No.
Yes, besides that.
I always find these questions hard because I'm very grateful for where I am today. But the one thing is, when I moved from Canada to the States, I wouldn't have started my business in California.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Taxes, regulations, just cost of living, and all the above.
All of the above. And so there was a couple things that really shocked me, and I had no idea because as a Canadian moving down here, I didn't realize that the states were so different. Each state having its own rules and regulations and culture and all of those things. And there was two things that really caught me off guard in California. And the first was the fact that they basically, oh, you didn't pay your $800. They just reach in your bank account and pull it on out, and it's up to you to figure out what that was for. Like which paper you didn't file that they decided you now owe them this money for. So that was mind-boggling to me. Like I couldn't believe that was real. And then the employment rules and laws, and how you are guilty because you're an employer. And I faced a lawsuit, and it was horrific. It was completely made up. And basically the answer was, well, you're an employer, so you're a bad person. Like, it's a summarize, but and I've sadly, I've heard this from other people too. So I was like, you know what? California is not so kind. I'm going to go somewhere that likes business.
Did you move the company?
Yep, I sure did.
Where'd you move it to?
Nevada.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
years were you in California before you moved
4.
to Okay. And
Yeah.
the lawsuit was in California?
hmm
And is that the straw that broke the camel's back?
No, it wasn't, but it was kind of the icing on the cake. I'd already decided to move. And actually, by the time the lawsuit was officially filed, I was in Nevada. But, at that point, it doesn't matter because it happened in California. But yeah, there was a lot of factors, but the expenses, the taxes, but, as somebody who had no idea what she was in for in that state, that would be what I would tell myself. Go to Nevada to start with.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? When you're somebody moving to a country, it's hard to really understand the differences between where you live, right? And for us, it's obviously the 50 states. Yes, quite different. Yeah. So, Julie, you're so busy. I know you're running this business. What do you do outside of work? What do you do for fun?
Pickleball and poker.
Pickleball and poker. Whoa. Okay. So, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do a lot of CrossFit, but after having a child, CrossFit was just a little bit too intense, and so a friend introduced me to pickleball a few years ago, and I've been playing as much as I possibly can ever since. So it's a great community game. I've made so many friends. I'm on 2 teams. It's great. And then poker was actually something I did before I moved to Las Vegas, a lot more than I do now that I live in Las Vegas, which is funny. People always are surprised to hear that, but part of that's just business and child. Those two things. It's always like, well, I could have spent time with my son, but instead I spent 7 hours at the poker room. So I'm like, no, I'd rather be spending time with my son while I can, and I can play poker later in life.
So, you're like in person poker, online, or both?
In person. No, I don't like online. I love watching what like. Have you ever played poker? Do you play at the tables?
My son and my husband and my father are all into poker. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because there's very few females that play poker. And if you sit there quietly at the table, it is hours of entertainment of what goes on. Everything from the drunk guy to the obnoxious guy to the bully to the crazy stories. I love it.
Have you ever set your sights on the World Series of Poker?
Yeah, I will. It's a goal that I have for the future. It's one of those things where I kind of want to do the business thing, really put my heart and soul into the business, and poker's just fun right now. But there is a point in time where I want to focus a lot more on poker.
That's awesome. So, World Series of Poker, we're going to watch for you in 5 to 10 years. Okay. And I think we talked a little bit about this off air, and I think there's a really interesting conversation to have around future, right? You were talking about future thinking ahead 5 years, 10 years seems a little far away. You like to think in 5-year chunks. If someone out there is thinking about their transition one day to spend more time outside of their business versus in their business, isn't this an interesting conversation, right? Because about what it makes you a full person, how you want to spend your time. And of course, we can kind of come up with a narrative on the legacy you want to leave, but I think the identity, right? The identity of how do you see yourself and where are you going to get sort of that energy and enjoyment. You talked about pickleball and poker. So okay, we can make some jokes and say you're going to go on pickleball, tournaments around the world and or maybe poker tournaments around the world. But in all seriousness, how do you think about that? How do you kind of put these ideas together and say, do you have a passion outside of work that you said if you pursued this would be really fulfilling?
Yeah, I think, you said, and I mentioned this to you when we talked, was that one of the questions you asked me on a call we had was kind of what would you do or what will you do when you exit? Like, what's your plan? And I had an answer. I was like, I definitely want to put more time into poker so I can see how good I can get. And pickleball would be kind of the fun fitness, friends aspect of it. But I've asked a lot of other entrepreneurs since then, and they kind of get this like panicked, like bewildered look on their face, like, "I never thought about it." And so I think it's interesting because I think the people that have that plan, I think they can kind of plan for an exit in a better way, because they're not just thinking they're not one thing. Like you said, they're a whole person. And everybody has family and they might think family, but I'm very aware of the fact that, I only have one son and he's going to grow up. And at some point, that's not going to be what takes up all my time. As much as I would love for him to want me to be around all the time, that's not a healthy thing for a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old. So, I realized that won't be the thing. And so I love having a backup plan and interests and something to look forward to.
That's great. I love that. And it's an encouragement for everybody out there to think about your life in age, whether it's age or life stage. We're all going to reach that point where we're looking for those transitions. So thanks for sharing yours, Julie. Julie, if people want to reach out, learn more about you, learn more about book launchers, what's a good way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing is we have a workbook on the 7 steps to write a book that's set up to sell. So if you have any interest in the author journey at all, you can get it at booklaunchers.com/7 steps. And then that gets you my email address. You can just hit reply to that email. It's got all our website URLs and all those things. So that's the best place to go.
Perfect. 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 Thank you so much, Julie, for coming on The Entrepreneur Gene and being with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So thank you to our audience. If you learned something today or laughed, tell someone about this podcast or share it. Thank you so much again, Julie, for being with us. This has been another exciting podcast of The Entrepreneur Gene. We'll see you next time. Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support The Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.